Welcome back to the smoke-filled room, once again under the hostile takeover of Christopher Jackowiak. Colin Corbett is still taking care of his newborn child, so unfortunately you get to deal with my ugly mug hosting the SFR once again this week, wherein Lane has given me agenda not completely packed with Chicago topics, so unfortunately I have to talk about something completely different. What with me again, as always, is Core Strategies downstate political expert Michael Butler. Say hello, Michael.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And our guests this week are Senator Jason Plummer from the 55th District. Jason, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining us again.
I'm doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Also returning with us is Sharon Langlotz-Johnson, a staffer for the House Republicans and former Palatine Township Supervisor. Sharon, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And also joining us is Cheryl Mathews, the St. Clair County GOP Chairwoman. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining us.
I appreciate the invitation.
So we're going to kick off this agenda with kind of the hottest topic in Illinois politics post the election, and that's the Prisoner Review Board. The Prisoner Review Board has been an issue in state politics for a while now, though it's unfortunately that it took the death of an 11-year-old child in order to bring it to light. There have been multiple members of the Prisoner Review Board that have resigned, and Governor Pritzker is trying to frame the issue in the best way possible for himself. With all these things happening for the Prisoner Review Board, Senate Republicans are out with new legislation in order to fix the Prisoner Review Board, and I know Jason Plummer, our guest today, has been at the forefront of this issue. He was on Fox and Friends this week talking about the issue. So, Jason, what is the Senate Republicans' ideas going into this legislation, and how can we make the Prisoner Review Board better?
Well, yeah, thanks, Chris. And to your point, it's just absolutely terrible that it took a tragedy like this for an important issue to get more attention. Senate Republicans are saying the same thing that we've been saying for 3+ years now, almost 4 years. We need to make sure, and this holds true for agencies, departments, commissions beyond the Prisoner Review Board. We just want to make sure that people serving the people of Illinois in these positions are qualified to do a good job. We feel the governor has been playing politics with the board. We think that he's used these positions to perhaps benefit his political allies, and the people of Illinois have suffered. So what we've rolled out is legislation that basically raises the bar to make sure that the people making these very, very consequential decisions have a background and a career experience in these areas to make the right decisions. We've also, of course, tried to highlight some needs for more transparency and more training for the people that are involved in the Prisoner Review Board.
Well, what's the response kind of coming out of the Senate Democrats in response to this legislation so far? Because it seems like the governor's camp and the Senate Democrats kind of want to get away from this issue as much as possible, because it does make them seem like they have a little bit of egg on their face with this. I mean, the Prisoner Review Board, this isn't a new issue, like you said. This has been an issue for a few years now. So how do you expect Senate President Harman and the rest of the Senate Democratic caucus to react to this legislation?
Well, the Senate hasn't been in session the last couple of weeks. So we'll have an opportunity, I think, next week to really sit down and engage one-on-one, hopefully face-to-face with the Senate Democrats on the issue. I'm hopeful that the Senate Democrats are willing to work with us on this. As we've seen in the last few years, the real obstacle to fixing the PRB hasn't been in the legislature. It's been in the governor's office, right? So I think if there's a real obstacle, I'm hopeful it's not the Senate Democrats. I think it's Governor Pritzker. And I hope that there can be a bipartisan solution that comes from the Senate. And I hope the governor finally heeds our warning and heeds our advice and does the right thing. So I'm hopeful, but we'll have to wait and see.
And that seems to be the common theme with a lot of the legislation going down in Springfield. You can correct me if perhaps I'm mistaken on these things, but it seems like Senator Harman effectively knows how to run his caucus very well. And he also knows how to push through legislation, even sometimes on a bipartisan level, to the extent that sometimes it's not him who's the biggest obstacle to a bill. It's usually Speaker Welch over in the House, or it's the governor himself. So hopefully, at the very least, we can get some common consensus here with the Senate and the Senate Republican and Democratic caucus. And if JB is going to be the problem, so be it. But but I think it's better for the state of Illinois, and it's better for Republicans, frankly, if they can present a bipartisan piece of legislation in the Senate. And if the governor's going to stop it, let him stop a good government review board. That's great for us from a political perspective. We want him to do things like that. I want to move. I want to ask Sharon this question regarding the Prisoner Review Board. Obviously, you're on the House side of things, so you don't work directly with the Prisoner Review Board as closely as the senator here does. But you know, in your capacity working for the state, the Illinois House of Representatives, are you hearing anything in regards to anything the House can do on the Prisoner Review Board, or just in general on this specific issue?
I honestly haven't heard anything this week as far as any legislation. You know, we are, you know, we're aware Senator Plummer is doing that. But Representative Ugasti just, you know, 20 minutes ago got up and was talking about the fact that there's only about 14% of Republican bills that are even have passed out of committee compared to, you know, the other large amount that, and it doesn't match, you know, it doesn't match Republicans to Democrats. So it's very hard for us to get anything pushed through. But being a retired police officer, I have a personal interest, obviously, in that Prisoner Review Board being competent, because over and over, and not too long ago, we released somebody that was a cop killer. You know, no one should be a cop killer. In fact, that individual is probably imprisoned at the time when we had, you know, capital punishment here. And because that's gone, all of a sudden now it's okay to let these guys out of jail. You know, prisoner review boards think that that's okay. They're not qualified.
And this is in direct response to perhaps the Safety Act legislation that we talked about 3 years ago. But one of the biggest points that the Republican Party and many conservative voices in politics were saying was that this is the exact type of things that were going to happen with the Safety Act. That the Safety Act was going to abolish cash bail, people just be let out and commit crimes. Here you're dealing with people who are serving time for crimes and are just getting out on parole and are still committing crimes. So I think the other thing that needs to be discussed here, in addition to the whole process of letting people out at all, it needs to be, you know, what is happening in these prisons in general, because it seems like there's an issue with recidivism in Illinois prisons that needs to be addressed, in addition to addressing the concern of whether or not we're actually going to let these people out at all. Because if we can actually take steps forward to make sure that we have quality people getting out of prison, that they've actually learned something after doing their time, as opposed to just letting out people willy-nilly, and that's what leads to the situations we have here.
Yeah, Chris, can I kind of wrap all that together in one thing I want to highlight? I think it's important. You know, the governor right now is like saying, oh, you know, the legislature is playing politics with this, which couldn't be further than the truth. It's absolutely ludicrous. I have all kinds of people that flow through the executive appointments committee, and we don't play politics in that committee. I don't care if it's, you know, someone wants to serve on, you know, transportation commissions or the board of trustees of U of I, or, you know, the head of, you know, DCFS, whatever, right? We're looking for people who are qualified. We have done everything we can to politely, quietly, raise issues with the governor. But what's happening at the PRB, right, is a symptom of what's happening in the broader criminal justice realm in Illinois. You know, if you look at Governor Rod Blagojevich, if you look at Governor Pat Quinn, if you look at Governor Bruce Rauner, Democrat, Republican, the PRB voted pretty consistently across those administrations. The rate at which people got out, the rate at which the type of people that got out, it was all very consistent, because frankly, I don't think those three administrations played politics with the PRB. They weren't trying to force their philosophy onto the board. It wasn't until J.B. Pritzker came into office that violent criminals became 2.5 times more likely to be released. The types of people being released were some of the worst of the worst. I know Sharon referenced a cop killer. There's been multiple cop killers released, child molesters, rapists, people who've committed multiple murders. And this wouldn't have happened under previous administrations, Republican or Democrat. It is a problem solely with J.B. Pritzker. And then you talk about the Safety Act. You talk about some of the other issues we're having, the antagonistic approach this administration has to law enforcement, right? The reason why the PRB has gone off the rails is because J.B. Pritzker has used it as a tool to, you know, imprint his philosophy on criminal justice on the state of Illinois. And he's held some of the members of the PRB hostage by not allowing the Senate to confirm them. Thereby, their $100,000 a year salary is held hostage by the governor's office. Well, some of those people are going to vote the way the governor wants them to vote, so that they get paid until they get confirmed. Right? It's much deeper than people realize, the way this administration has gone to manipulate the PRB, and that's just one leg of the stool in terms of what he's doing in criminal justice, letting people out, not putting people behind bars, being antagonistic towards our prosecutors, our judges, our law enforcement. It's deeply problematic.
I would certainly agree with all those points. The only thing I might say is I don't know if it's all and only a JB Pritzker problem. I think there's a general, philosophy that's kind of rooted in the modern Democratic Party, or most of the Democratic Party at least, that kind of prioritizes this. Justice for them means we need to let people back out on the street, because that's what real justice is. It's not actually, people taking, responsibility for their crimes, people actually doing the time which they've been allotted to by the judge and the jury. I think it's a general problem that the Democratic Party has with its ideology, particularly in the last few years, after George Floyd and a number of other, more liberal prosecutors came in there. I want to let Michael or Cheryl include their thoughts on this issue. I know Michael's trying to jump in, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I would just say, and Jason kind of alluded to it, that, last year we saw Pritzker play a lot of games with these appointments where he was, appointing people. And then when their 60 days were up, he was unappointing and reappointing because he wanted to skirt the approval process in the Senate. So he knew and he was aware that a lot of these people did not meet the, not qualifications in a literal sense, but the qualifications that, the Senate would like to see these members hold. So he knew they weren't qualified, and this problem is directly a result of his actions. And, he needs to take responsibility for this and quit trying to shift blame elsewhere, because it's his fault. He's the one that picked these people, and they're the ones that have, taken this approach where they're letting people out that have no business being released.
So it's certainly going to be a topic we're going to be looking at very closely here. We wish Jason the best of luck in pushing that legislation through down in Springfield, and we hope that he keeps us updated over the course of session regarding the progress that this bill is going through. I want to move. I have to talk about Chicago. I'm in charge of the podcast. I have to talk about Chicago at some point, so we'll see if any of you guys find this topic interesting. But one of the biggest controversies this week was a result of a Chicago Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez of the 25th Ward attending a pro-Palestine, anti-Israel rally in the city of Chicago, wherein an American flag was burned. And this led to a lot of controversy. Various members of the Chicago City Council called on him to resign or be stripped from his leadership positions for this anti-American act, where his response was varied. At first, he said he did not know the flag was burned. He showed up afterwards, and then their picture of him comes out where he's standing right in front of the flag, so obviously he sees it. Then he started, saying the guy who burned it was a Marine, so he got away with it. It was a very interesting course of events. The city council had a vote to censor him. That vote failed. Didn't really go anywhere. But in the grand scheme of things, the question I want to ask to the group, because I have my own opinion on Alderman Sigcho Lopez, amongst other things, but does government have the available option to censor people for utilizing their first right freedom of speech? Because that's what flag burning is. It is a constitutional freedom of speech in this country as of right now. Do you think government has a role to censor people or to punish them for being at such a rally?
I would just say that obviously you have freedom. You have the First Amendment right to do something like this, like the Supreme Court's been clear, but you don't have freedom from consequences. And, you can say whatever you want, but there's, you're opening yourself up to ramifications if you're doing something like this that is extremely controversial and that'll, the vast majority of people think is in bad taste.
Cheryl, do you have any thoughts on this specific topic? I know you're a downstater, probably with some more fierce opinions on the American flag and patriotism. Where do you think the government has a role to play here, if any?
I do think there needs to be more respect for the flag which represents our great country. And it is sad to see people burn it. And even in that protest, I saw some people had printed out American flags and they were ripping it up. And that just, yeah, it really hurts my heart. My husband was military. And so that, I guess the patriotism is stronger down here.
Senator Plummer, you were going to jump in.
No, I think, I like Michael's comments and Cheryl's comments. I'm a Navy guy. But I think, something you said in the PRB conversation, Chris, I think applies to this, right? This is a one-off thing, but I think this speaks much more broadly to where the Democrat Party has gone today. I remember, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, people would say, well, this isn't the party of Truman, right? Well, this isn't the party of Bill Clinton anymore. This isn't the party of any of these folks. I mean, the Democrat Party has really gone far left, and J.B. Pritzker's and his policies in Illinois exemplify how far left they've gone. And the fact that you could have an elected official participate something like this, which according to the U.S. Supreme Court, it's a constitutional right of his. But according to Michael Butler, and I agree, there should be consequences. And the fact that there won't be consequences speaks to really where that party has gone.
Yeah, I think there was two main takeaways I had after this particular incident happened. The first one is that you have to be smarter than this. You shouldn't be going to rallies where they're going to be burning American flags. I think Alderman Sigcho Lopez made a stupid decision, a poor decision, whereas he was trying to get some, attention, going to the pro-Palestine protest, and should have done a more due diligence on his end to avoid these types of things. But the second thing is I certainly agree with Jason Plummer, with Senator Plummer, that the Democratic Party has moved significantly further to the left in recent years. One thing I always find interesting about Chicago is that Chicago Democrats tend to do things that I would never expect Springfield Democrats to do. And what I mean by this is if a Springfield a state representative in Springfield did the same thing that the alderman did, I think it would have made headlines, but I don't think it would have had the same adverse reaction that it had in Chicago. There were press conferences. There were, statements from caucuses that were, condemned by other people in that same caucus. This was a very, in a city council where 47 out of 50 of them are Democrats and many of them are Democratic committeemen. There was a very right-wing reaction to, I think, the Alderman Sigcho Lopez here, which I would have expected down in Springfield. So I always find it interesting about Chicago Democrats who tend to act very differently than perhaps their colleagues down in Springfield do, which I always have to find a way to point that out.
I hope the burning of the flag, or opposition to the burning of the flag, isn't classified as a right-wing thing. I hope that, again, that's something that we can unify around, and for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's Cheryl's family has a military tradition. Maybe it's the freedoms and the opportunity that flag represents. You would hope that the flag isn't a partisan emblem. And that's what concerns me, is there are significant portions of the other party where not just is that maybe okay, but maybe that's cheered. And I hope that the elements of the Democrat Party that have respect for the flag can maybe gain a little bit more power.
I was just going to say, and what I've noticed over the years working for the state is that, when if a Republican does something that's criminal or stupid or just ignorant, they're chastised and they are verbally beat up by their own caucus. That does not happen very often in the Democrat side. And they could bribe somebody, they could have all this corruption going on, and it's silence. There's very little conversations about that. and they just pretend, oh, well, everything's fine. Tom Cullerton was a perfect example. He was in the Senate for how long? Under indictment. And that was okay.
I think the only exception to this in recent memory, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, was when that was in 2022 with Senator Hastings. When the allegations against Senator Hastings came out, and it was basically unanimous that the governor, the Senate president, were all basically saying, "Hey, you either need to resign, or we're basically going to let you die." That obviously didn't happen. Hastings ended up winning re-election anyway, and now he's back in good graces. So perhaps it's not a perfect example, but I think it's the most recent memory that I have that the Senate people, the Democratic Party consolidated, basically saying, "We don't like this guy anymore. We don't want him anymore." No matter how
they only do that
temporary it
if
was.
you vote against them. They did that to the rabbi up in Lake County. And they just did that to Mary Flowers.
I think Chris, and this isn't regarding a particular instance or anything, but as I say all the time in Springfield, actions speak louder than words, right? We have a governor who is wonderful at getting in front of a podium and saying things that sound nice, but when you watch the candidates that he funds, when you watch the initiatives that he pushes, when you watch the things that he does behind the scenes, they often contradict his words. And so when it comes to holding people accountable to their actions, when it comes to Republicans or Democrats, clearing out the dead wood and really focusing on people of both parties who just want good government and are going to work for their constituents, I think actions speak louder than words, and I'm very disappointed sometimes by both parties in terms of addressing some of those concerns.
Continuing with the general discussion of how far left the Democratic Party has gone, we're going to touch on a topic now which is very near and dear to Michael's heart, and that is the cancellation of Easter by the Biden administration. This was a very big topic over the last week or so with Holy Week, and President Biden declared, well, not really declared, we gotta be specific here, but announced Transgender Awareness Day or Visibility Day or whatever one it was on the 31st, would happen to coincide with Easter. So I'm going to let Michael take this away. Michael and I have had some lengthy conversations this week regarding the resurrection of our Lord and its relation to this day of awareness. So Michael, please take it away from here.
It's just absurd. And I heard from a lot of people, over the weekend that were texting me, just like making fun of it and just saying, can you believe that they did this? Of all days, like Easter Sunday is Trans Day of Visibility. Like, it just shows how out of touch the Biden administration is and how far removed they are from reality. And I thought that Trump had a good point. I saw a clip from one of his rallies, I think a day or two ago, where he said that we were going to make sure that November 5th was Christian Day of Visibility, and we were going to have as many Christians voting in the November election as possible, which I think was a good twist on it. But this is just embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Cheryl, you're from the same yoke as Butler, so to speak, on many issues. I want to hear your opinion of this.
Well, another sad issue. It makes me sad that he would promote such a thing on Easter. Why not do it the day before or the day after? But to do it on the day that is supposed to be a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus is unspeakable to me. That he would.
Well, and I also saw that, like, a similar issue same day, or same weekend, they have their famous like Easter egg roll at the White House. And one of the things that they do is they have children decorate eggs, and then there's like a contest. And the White House prohibited any religious like crosses or anything like that on eggs. If you put that on there, you were, disqualified from the contest. So, they're not allowing children to express their First Amendment rights in this contest on Easter, but then they sure as heck want to promote this. It's just sad.
Yeah, I think the big question in regards to all of this is if it has any blowback from the median voter on Biden himself, because I think that the average voter in America is moving progressively away from religion. This is just a problem with society as a whole. And I don't know how much it resonates this day and age with the fact that, president's ignoring Easter. I mean, this is a more secular country, perhaps every day. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Michael. I mean, Michael and I, as I said, we've been discussing this topic at length over the past week or so. I just wonder what the significance is going to be in terms of where this is going to go at the polls. Is this going to move any voters?
I don't think that it, in and of itself, is going to have a lot of cause significant movement, but I think it's one of those things where you just add it to the list, and then you've got a long list of examples of them doing things similar to this that really aggravated a lot of people. And when you have that long list of here are all the reasons why I'm not voting for Joe Biden, maybe it's not high on the list, but it adds up.
So we're gonna kind of move away. I mean, I have a lot of depressing topics today, guys. Unfortunately, one day when Illinois becomes a better state, perhaps they'll have some positive things to speak about. But for now, we're going to touch on a few topics in relation to immigration and migrants. So the first question we're going to talk on is that there's new reports out describing the fact that non-citizens are receiving better benefits and costs than people who live in this state and the citizens who live in this state under Pritzker's current health care plan. And this has been an issue going back decades with the question of legal immigration, undocumented, etc., receiving government benefits, because in reality, they end up getting better benefits than the poor people who live in this country, who are citizens of this country, who've always lived in this country. We've seen problems when it comes to actually giving undocumented immigrants costs. Last year during session, there was the big showdown in the Senate and the House regarding whether or not they were going to actually give undocumented citizens health care. Now we're seeing that non-citizens are getting great health care under Pritzker's current plan. So I want to pose it to the senator. If he has any thoughts about, undocumented and non-citizens receiving better health care in Pritzker's current plan, or anything being done about this situation.
Well, I think this topic is one of the good examples of why the budget that the governor presented here a few weeks ago is absolutely bunk. We are spending a tremendous amount of money, into the billions of dollars a year, on non-citizens that, frankly, J.B. Pritzker invited to Illinois. We're talking about healthcare, and I'll get into some details on healthcare in a second, but we're not touching on the cost to society, on education, on law enforcement, on healthcare, on housing, on all of these others. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in all these different buckets, right? We'll probably spend, well north of $2 billion, maybe $3 billion, I'm guessing, in Illinois this year on non-citizens. And when I say the governor invited him here, I mean, Illinois is a sanctuary state. Chicago is a sanctuary city. Come to Illinois. We'll take care of you. The gold-plated healthcare is unlike anything any other state offers. So naturally, folks are going to go. They're going to follow the money, right? They're going to follow what's in their best interests. And so, if you look at, you said they get better healthcare than, you said poor Illinoisans. They get better healthcare than middle-class Illinoisans, and we're footing the bill. And we're not getting, unlike some of the Medicaid, we're not getting some of that subsidized by the federal government either. We're on the hook for this for the whole thing. And for every dollar we would spend on Medicaid, right, we would get like 50 cents back from the federal government. But because this is like a fee-for-service healthcare plan, which is like the best you can have, we're spending like $1.75 compared to that dollar, and we're getting no reimbursement from the federal government. So the Illinois taxpayers are on the hook for the whole $1.75. And so the costs are out of control. This thing started off as like a $20 million program. Then it became a $200 million program. And then it was $500, and then it was $1 billion. When all this is said and done, right, we're probably going to be we're going to be well north of $1 billion. We could be approaching $2 billion healthcare alone. And the governor doesn't know what to do about it because it's a mess of his creation, just like the PRB, just like a lot of these other things we're talking about. But he's going to point fingers at other folks, and he's going to come up with some really good stories behind the podium. The reality is we're raising taxes this year on Illinoisans to pay for non-Illinoisans that the governor invited here.
I think
Go ahead,
Sharon.
I was going to say, if I can jump on that, we get calls at our office all the time from the disabled families. Most of these folks were born this way, and they didn't have a choice here. They're not able-bodied. They can't, they have limited capacity. Since the state, had the survey, the Guidehouse study of wages, they still are not in compliance with that study. We have, and I'm reading off of their information, we've gone up 150% on minimum wage. They basically said, oh, here you go. We're going to give you more hours or we're going to give you more money per hour. But they didn't add those funds into that pot. They said, we will pay the person more, but they're still giving them the same amount of money. So they basically reduced the hours of care for these folks that live in, state homes, the Sillas. These people have nothing, basically. They get $90 a month to buy their underwear and get haircuts, and they're left with nothing. These are citizens of our state, and we are leaving them uncared for. These are older parents. They can't take, their parents are passing away, and these kids are left with nothing. No one care for them. And we continue to take things away from the disabled. It's unconscionable.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, just real briefly, Sharon's right. I say this on the floor of the Senate all the time, and I will forever say it until it changes. Under this administration, and frankly, under Democrat majorities, the very absolute most vulnerable Illinoisans suffer. Where do we need to be spending money? DCFS, the developmentally disabled, Murray Center. I mean, we're holding some of the infrastructure at Murray Center together with duct tape and baling wire at this point. Yeah. Yet we have billions of dollars for undocumented folks that J.B. Pritzker is inviting to Illinois. And oh, by the way, we're also raising taxes on hardworking Illinois families to fund that. We need to have a frank conversation about the core functions of government and the clear priorities of our legislators and our governor. And I assure you, J.B. Pritzker and frankly, his Democrat majorities right now, their priorities do not line up with the priorities of the vast majority of Illinois families. And that's something that we need to continue to talk about, because to Sharon's point, the most vulnerable Illinoisans, I don't care if they're kids trapped in Chicago public schools, or if they're developmentally disabled communities stuck in a SILA or a state facility that's not up to par. Those are the people we need to be prioritizing. We can't be creating additional crises that we frankly can't afford. And that's what the governor's done with the migrant crisis.
One of the most basic premises in government is if you subsidize something, you get more of it. And we're going to be seeing this. We're seeing this now with migrant health care, in that if the more you fund immigrant health care or undocumented health care, they're just going to keep getting more undocumented and more migrants, because they're not going to come here through proper legal channels and go through the citizenship process so they can get worse health care. That's not how these things work. So all you're doing is incentivizing more people to come to this country illegally so they can get a better health care service than they would have if they were citizens. And that moves us nicely into our next topic, which is we're probably going to be getting more migrants coming into the state, because Representative Maurice West out of Rockford is pushing to bring more migrants into the Rockford area for the incentive, because it's incentivized. So now you're going to start seeing these, local games being played with money, because the state, and to a lesser extent the federal government, is going to keep subsidizing the migrant issue. They're going to keep subsidizing the immigration issue. So you're going to have more legislators and municipalities who can afford to do this from a political perspective, do things like this. So I want to open this up for discussion, in terms of more migrants coming in and the subsidies. Is there anything that can be done to stop this? I mean, how much more do we have to spend in order for this to finally tip over on this state?
Well, I was gonna say, I don't think it's a political positive for anyone to do that, because I don't care where you live. Nobody wants mass migrants. I mean, they've, now we have people with tuberculosis that are infecting our areas. We've got in Lake County, we have measles up here already. They're infecting our general population of illnesses that were eradicated basically in this area, or in the States, and they're making it worse. So this is not a positive for anybody politically. I think if they were to sit down and talk to their constituents would understand. Including, there was a video not too long ago of the residents of Chicago berating Johnson, berating him, and they were Hispanic, they were Black. These people were people that were citizens, and they're not happy.
I think one of the big draws here is that if they can push migrants to go to Rockford, they can push them anywhere. And one of the biggest fears in the state right now is that they're going to start going down to places like Michael, Jason, and where Cheryl live. So I want to have this conversation specifically with Cheryl. Is this has been a concern for a while now. Are you hearing any updates regarding are there any migrants coming to St. Clair or any of the other counties? What's the general fear for yourself or other people in your area?
I personally haven't seen any, but what does concern me is the issue. I don't know how far it's come down south, is the squatter issue. I have a rental, and I've got a renter in there, but if she were to move out, then squatters move in. My son had a rental that was empty, and just local squatters got in there, and they're very difficult to get out. And then when you add on the immigration issue to it, it just makes it a legal nightmare.
Well, I think some of these local elected officials see the dollar amounts. They see, oh, we can get $165 million if we bring them here. But obviously that $165 million is not going to be enough to cover, the situation once they arrive. I mean, you've got strains on housing already. Like, we don't have enough housing in a lot of areas of the state. Like, where are we going to put them? Added strain on our schools. A lot of these people have children. Where are they going to go? Strain on our hospitals. So it's easy to see, I'm going to get $165 million if I accept some of these, but it's not enough to really cover the cost of it, and it's going to cause a lot of other problems.
Yeah, Chris, I want to take a little bit of a different, approach or vision here, even, right? I mean, at the end of the day, these migrants, right, they're human beings. And I was talking about how some of the most vulnerable Illinoisans suffer under this administration. Well, some of these migrants are some of the most vulnerable people in the world. And, watching the media allow J.B. Pritzker to get away with gaslighting the world when he points his fingers at Governor Abbott, or he points his finger at Governor DeSantis. The reality is these people want a better future. They want opportunity for their family, and they think that opportunity is in America. And then they hear people like J.B. Pritzker, and they hear people like Brandon Johnson say, come to Illinois and get free healthcare. Come to Illinois, get free healthcare, get free housing, get free education. And these people, they come from Mexico, they come from Guatemala, they come from Honduras, they come from Africa. A lot of them are military aged males coming from China, right? I mean, these people are coming from a lot of different places, and the vast majority of them want a better future, and they're getting murdered, they're getting raped, they're getting trafficked. I've had legislation in the Senate to address the massive human trafficking issue that we have in Illinois ever since I was elected to the Senate. And that thing can't get a committee hearing because it increases penalties on people that take advantage of vulnerable human beings. It puts penalties on people that traffic folks. And so you have J.B. Pritzker inviting these people to come here. And these people go through absolute horrors that are unimaginable to the average Illinoisan. And then when they get here, they're put out on the street, right? And it's all because of political messaging from politicians that aren't looking out for their best interests. This migrant crisis is overwhelming our social services. It's driving a wedge between Illinoisans that need services and other folks, and we've created a humanity crisis. We've created a real problem. And then I see JB Pritzker and people like JB Pritzker, people like Gavin Newsom, people like a few other folks that say, hey, the doors are open, come on up, here's free money, right? Create a crisis for Texas and Arizona and these other places. And they're perfectly fine when these people are getting brutalized and the crisis is in Texas. But then when the crisis comes here, they want to point their fingers at Governor Abbott. And let me tell you, if we actually had elected officials who put public policy in place to prevent what we see happening, these people wouldn't be going through those horrors and those abuses and the human trafficking and just the bad stuff. And by the way, I haven't even touched on fentanyl and all these other things that are all part of this. And, we have 100,000 Americans a year dying from fentanyl overdoses. It's coming across the southern border with the migrants, right? And we all look the other way. I mean, if someone told me the other day, the number of American dead from fentanyl would be like if a 747 a day fell out of the sky. I think if that were happening, we would do something about it. But we all want to look the other way on fentanyl because it gets in the way of the Democrat Party's border policies and their politics. And I just, this isn't a Republican or Democrat thing. This is a humanity thing. And what we're doing to these people is immoral and it's disgusting and it's just very tragic.
And that's the unfortunate thing about all this, about these migrants, is that they're being used as a pawn in every stage of the process here. They're being used as pawns by they're called like coyotes over the border in Mexico.
The cartels,
the cartel coyotes. They're being used as pawns by them to get them over the border and to traffic things into this country. They're being used as pawns by Democrats in order to get, in order to push an agenda at the southern border and in their own state. And frankly speaking, they are to some extent being used as pawns by Republicans, especially in Washington, D.C., because in D.C. specifically, it's just a lot of complaining about the issue. Nothing's actually getting done on the specific issue. So at every stage of politics and life, these migrants are being used as political pawns. Now, I understand, I've been the most vocal person on this podcast over the last year almost regarding the migrant crisis and my opposition to everything that's going on here. Fact of the matter is, all this boils down to is that the government simply does not want to take responsibility for the problem at hand, and that's why things have gotten so bad. And the fact of the matter is that our beloved governor is spending more time outside of this state raising awareness over the abortion issue and prepping himself up to be potentially the Democratic nominee for president if it's not Biden at the convention than he is about actually addressing concerns such as the migrant crisis or anything else going on in this state right now. So that's the other thing I wanted to really talk about is, Pritzker is going west. He's fundraising for DNC and he's fundraising for abortion rights. Is this a guy who's actually has an idea of what he wants to get done in this state? Or is he really just in this for himself to make a national profile and to raise funds for abortion in the DNC? It does not seem to me like he wants to govern right
now. That's not even a question.
Yeah, Chris, I've said it since his first year or two in office. It is apparent based on the policy priorities and the messaging coming out of the governor's office that Illinois is a stepping stone to a bigger dream. And if you look at from the budget to the migrants to the PRB, to like the whole gamut, right? If you look at the policies championed by this governor, they always have a national flavor to them. He's always looking for a national attention. And it is demonstrably true that none of them are in the long-term interest over 10, 20, 30 years of the average Illinoisan. When it's time to cash, when it's time to pay the bill for kind of what JB Pritzker has done here, the folks on this podcast are probably going to be sitting in Illinois, paying their taxes, trying to figure out how to fix it. And JB Pritzker will not be in Illinois. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. And so it's I've always kind of operated on the philosophy that good government is good politics, right? If you take care of your constituents, if the streets are clean, if there's no crime, if the taxes are low, the economy is strong, you don't have to worry about politics. You have to do these charades because people are going to appreciate what's going on. This governor doesn't have good policy. He doesn't have good government. So it's gaslighting, and it's talking about abortion. It's talking about these national issues. It's going to Florida. It's going to Texas. It's going to California. It's playing to the national stage while truly Illinois is circling the drain, and we have to address that.
Well, and Jason, the fact is he doesn't care. That's really what it comes down to. That man cares about himself only. He, and he has done so much damage that I don't know how long. It could be at least 20 years before we can recover from this. I mean, every day there's, well, all right, that's an exaggeration. 3 times a week, I get an email about some new program for something, and it never has anything to do with disabled or seniors.
Well, and many of these programs, as you guys all well know, are new ongoing programs that he is funding with one-time money, right? Yeah. And it's easy to do that when you're not going to be you're not going to be the guy responsible for that when kind of the payment is due. We are living well beyond our means. Since J.B. Pritzker became governor, the budget's increased like 30%. He just recommended a $53 billion budget. Most of that, not most, but a lot of that is predicated upon tax receipts and federal money that we know is not sustainable. And I mean, how do you fix this mess that's been created? So, look, yeah. we have politicians on both parties that they're keyboard warriors and they're show horses. And I always like to think that there's a lot of workhorses behind the scenes trying to fix stuff, but we have the ultimate show horse in Governor Pritzker, and he's auditioning for the national stage. It's the old saying, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. And I don't think the governor can fiddle, but he's doing everything else while Illinois burns.
Coming from my perspective, it seemed like when JB first got elected in his first few years of his term, because he got elected on a little bit of a mandate after Rauner. People were so frustrated with Rauner and wanted to change. It seemed like the first couple of years he had a pretty good, he had some pretty good press. People were more positive about what was going on in the state. But it seems like ever since COVID, but more specifically in the last couple of years, since he got reelected, it just seems like Pritzker has been dialing it in, and people are getting less and less people have less and less of a higher opinion about Pritzker. Even Democrats that I talk to have less and less of a high opinion, less and less so have a high opinion of Pritzker over the past couple of years. It seems like ever since he beat Bailey, he's just been dialing it in, doesn't really care what's going on in the state. And you're seeing this in polling, because the polling has been moving more so in the Republicans' directions here. We hear a lot from the media that Republicans in the state, the new term is doom grifter. That was Pritzker's, phrase from the State of the State address earlier this year, that we're all doom grifters. And I sympathize with that a little bit, because I've been calling the Republican Party the old man yells at cloud party for a long time now. And that's just my opinion. But the fact of the matter is, it seems like voters are kind of backing us up on this pessimistic attitude. Only in one poll, only 27% said the state was headed in the right direction. 60% said it's in the wrong track. IEA's polling is saying that 32% said right track, 58% said wrong track.
But how many of those people actually vote? And that's the problem.
Well, that's the press.
And even our primaries, we've got very small specific groups choosing who our choices for our general election. And then we don't even have people coming out for our general election. If we had every Republican voting, who knows what we could accomplish?
Yeah, but that's incumbent upon us, though, right? I mean,
I agree.
If the Republicans, and we've seen this the last couple cycles, right? If the Republicans can't motivate their base to show up, then that's a problem with the Republicans. I mean, Chris, you just hit on, Bruce Rauner was, he had popularity issues in 2018, but I'm pretty sure the Republican candidate for governor in 2018 got more votes than the Republican candidate for governor in 2022, right? And so, I mean, that's just mathematically, a problem if you want to fix Illinois. The Republican Party needs to be growing its base, and it needs to be growing our vote total. And on education, on taxes, on crime, on a lot of these issues, we have every opportunity to bring more minorities to the party, more suburban women to the party, more the old Reagan Democrats back to the party. We have those opportunities, but we have to be competitive. We have to talk about the issues that people care about that aren't always the red meat issues, right? We have to talk about the issues that people care about. We have to run organized campaigns, and we have to turn out the vote. And the Republican Party and some of our candidates have just shown an inability or maybe an unwillingness to do that. And that's on us, Chris. We have to fix that. And that might be a bigger fix than if we actually were in charge than to fix Illinois. Because let me tell you, Republican politics in Illinois right now is a circus.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been saying that I think Darren Bailey was actually 100% right on is the fact that, we have to start reaching out to people who just don't vote. There are so many people. I understand this from knocking on doors for part of my living. And, you get people you knock on their door and they're like, hell yeah, I'm voting Republican. I can't stand these Democrats. It's like, well, are you voting, November 19th, November 5th? There's an election November. Like, these people don't comprehend like when elections are. The sad thing is about this country and the average voter is that they're not like us. See, we can recite off the top of our head when the next election is, when we're supposed to vote, when early voting starts, when you can request a mail-in ballot. The average voter has no idea when they're even supposed to go to the polls or what's on the ballot. So I think we have to take a better initiative of educating voters. I'm telling you, if you want to support the candidates you want to support, you have to hold their hand. You have to hold their hand through this entire process to make sure the Republican Party actually has a chance in the state. So I want to turn it over to Michael and Cheryl here. Either one of you can chime in. What are you guys doing down in St. Clair County to get people out to vote? What's some things you're going to be trying out new in order to fix this issue of how we can actually get Republicans to pay attention to show up to the polls?
I think
Well, I think we're, working on recruiting high quality candidates. Like, people need a reason to vote, and they need candidates that they can believe in. So that's a big priority. Recruiting precinct committeemen to fill some of these vacant slots. I mean, we have vacancies, all over the state, in just about every county. That's a serious issue because we need those precinct committeemen to be out there kind of pounding the pavement and getting the word out. I think those are two big priorities. In the Metro East, I mean, there's been kind of a groundswell of activity the last couple of cycles, and we've had some success in flipping some seats, in Madison County, flipping, state rep and state senate seats. So it's all about, keeping what we've got and adding to it. And hopefully we can kind of continue this positive momentum we've seen the last cycle or two.
Chris, I think you hit it on the head that people need education. I don't know what happened between 8th grade or high school and now, but people have just forgotten what government is all about. They go to the polls and then they complain, well, there weren't that many Republicans on my ballot. Why not? Well, it wasn't just 3 weeks ago people decided to be on the ballot. That happened months ago. And it's just educating them. And you ask what we are doing down here in this education effort. We have a county newsletter that we send out. I try to make it educational in who's on the ballot, what district, what part of the county is involved with it, maybe some of the issues that are on there, just to get the word out that people need to be thinking of this. We also have a lot of meet and greet type events where we try to encourage the voters to come and meet the candidates face to face. Bring your questions, bring your comments, meet these people so that you can see the face that goes with that name. So when you get into either at home when you've got your ballot in front of you or you're at the polling place, that those names aren't just the first time that you've ever seen them. So that personal connection with the candidates is important. And we're trying to make lots of opportunities for that to happen around the county.
So I think generally speaking, the Republicans need, you're right, Republicans need to be doing a better job educating voters about the issues, about the candidates, and simply holding their hand, unfortunately, through the whole process here. I want to conclude on a related note here regarding people's trust of Illinois, their faith in Illinois, and faith in the legislative process in general. The ever maverick former Governor Pat Quinn is out with some new polling lately. And in this polling, it's showing that there is broad support for ethics reform down in Springfield. Now, as we all know, support for ethics reform doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be support for ethically minded candidates at the ballot. We know these things. However, it seems like, 3 out of 4 Illinoisans want to bar legislators from voting on bills with conflicts of interest. There's high support for a constitutional amendment, empowering voters to impose tougher ethical constraints on Springfield and prohibition on indicted ex-legislators from drawing a state pension. These are all things that are very important. But I think the big question is, the big two questions I want to end on here, quickly is this going to matter? Are voters going to, vote based on ethics reforms? I don't believe they are, so I'll get that out of the way now. And the other thing is kind of a question for our legislative minded people here is, does this have any chance of actually passing down spring?
I've introduced ethics related legislation, several times, Chris. I talk about it all the time. I have concerns about ethical lapses in the Democrat Party and ethical lapses in the Republican Party. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. However, we know the way the majority party operates in this state. And, I can come up with polls that people are going to want 80 or 95, 95% with all the time. Does it pass in Springfield? No, it won't, because you're going to have Governor Pritzker gaslighting people about book bans or something silly that's not even true or factually accurate. And they'll roll out a blue ribbon panel on ethics reform that will never meet, or they'll roll out something that sounds like ethics reform that isn't ethics reform. I mean, they're not respectful to the voters, but if the voters aren't engaged and if voters don't punish people that, treat them in that manner, they're not going to change. Tying that in with your previous, discussion, look, I believe in a two-party system, right? I've seen majority areas Republican, majority areas Democrat, that there kind of becomes an arrogance, and then they kind of stray, right? Competition keeps people healthy. It keeps government good. If we want to have a public policy impact in Illinois, if we want lower taxes, if we want ethics reform, if we don't want the PRB releasing child molesters, rapists, and murderers onto the streets, right? If we want to fix public policy, we have to have a two-party system. And if we're going to have a two-party system, we have to fix the Republican Party. And so these things are very complicated. And, I kind of probably have a little bit of a reputation for being a bit of an independent guy. The Republican Party has not been putting its best foot forward in Illinois for a period of time. And until we get better there, the Democrats are going to maintain control because they don't have opposition. And that lack of competition creates the nightmare that we live in.
And to jump on that, do I think ethics reform will ever happen? As long as there is a super majority and they don't need any one of our votes, it will never happen, because there's no reason for them to negotiate with anybody on our side. We also don't do a very good job of vetting people. We just automatically get behind somebody saying, oh, okay, that's the elected, that's our primary candidate. Well, some of these people are not people that I would let in my house. There's a lot of backgrounds on people that we're not looking into. And then something happens all of a sudden and everybody kind of takes that step back. We've got people that go around telling everybody that they're married and they're not, have, 3 baby mamas and all, there's just a lot of things that we could be vetting that we don't, making it, we want good, honest people, people with integrity and morals. And I can tell you that there's a significant number of both sides that are not that way. And with that, we also, we look at, mail ballots as a horrible, terrible thing. everybody was anti-mail ballot. Well, I got to tell you, 1990, I was a young kid. I worked on Jim Edgar's campaign, and he won by 80,000 votes because we did a mail ballot program, period. So we need to reinvent that part with us and, do something to make it better.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time today. We're gonna go to closing thoughts here. Anything you guys would like to promote? We'll start with, or just anything you would like to end the note on, maybe something positive. This has been a very depressing episode. When Chris is in charge, we talk about the depressing thing. When Colin comes back, we'll talk about something more joyful, hopefully. But until then, we're going to be depressing. So let's start with Senator Plummer. Senator Plummer, any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I think, we're talking about educating voters. You guys are doing a podcast, right? It's wonderful. I hope people watch this. I hope it motivates people to get engaged. I think that we need a two-party system in Illinois, and that'll make public policy good, which will make lives better for Illinoisans. There's a lot of people, kind of to second what Sharon said, there's a lot of people in both parties that are doing really, really, really well with the status quo right now. Who's not doing well with the status quo? Average Illinois families. I don't really care about Republicans and Democrats. I care about the people I work with every day. And, I'm one of the few legislators that actually has a real full-time job, in the Senate, outside of that. And the average Illinoisan's hurting. And I don't think government's being responsive. And the Republican Party has an opportunity if we don't shoot ourselves in both feet.
Sharon, any closing thoughts on your end you'd like to go over?
No, we just need to work harder to help each other. Honestly, one of the first things I told the member that I work for now, when he came in, I said, you have to learn to work with the Democrats, whether you like them or not, because that's the only way you'll get stuff done. And having that attitude has been positive. He's still able to, put his information out, but that's what we all need to do, is we need to work with them on our common ground. We have a lot more common ground than people realize.
Cheryl, any closing thoughts from St. Clair County?
Well, I want to thank Jason and the other elected officials here downstate. They work so hard, and they reflect the conservative values that we have here. And I just appreciate that they go to Springfield and work so hard and struggle, and you've done it for years, and we so appreciate that.
Michael, any closing thoughts? Sounds good.
Chris, I'm going to jump in front of Mike when I'm going to say being a state senator in Springfield can be tough, but Cheryl signing up to be the Republican chairman in St. Clair County, that is a battle, and that is hard work. I used to be the Madison County Republican chairman. So look, legislators, we don't get the credit. We shouldn't get the credit. It's the precinct committeeman, it's the county chairman, it's the people that are out there busting their tails, not for a paycheck and not for a pension, but for a passion. And so it's the Cheryl Mathews that moved the needle. It's not the legislators.
All right.
Michael, take us home.
All right. I was just gonna say, we got a lot of opportunities, I think, this year, even in Illinois, and it's just gonna take all of us, like all hands on deck, to make those a reality. And I think that there's some members that we need to work hard to keep, like Kevin Schmidt. There's some members that we need to work hard to defeat, like Katie Stewart, and let's make it happen.
For my closing thoughts, there are actually elections next week. If you live in the city of Chicago, you can vote next Wednesday and Thursday in your local school council elections. These things won't be as important after they go through with the Chicago Elected School Board, or maybe they won't. I still don't even know if they passed those bills yet. Who knows? But
No, we did.
Okay, wonderful. They managed not to screw that up. But if you live in the city of Chicago, Wednesday and Thursday, Wednesday for elementary schools, Thursday for high schools, vote in your school council elections to get good people in there. Tune in next week to see if it's my ugly mug back here again. Maybe it's Collins. Maybe it's Finkston's. Maybe they'll put Butler in charge, or maybe we'll bring back Matt McCann, who used to work for us 4 years ago, to run the show. Who knows? You can only find out one way, is if you tune in next Friday. So thank you and have a wonderful week, guys.